everybody, welcome back to Pagan's Witchy Corner. My name is Pagan, and today I am joined by a really awesome author who I have been a very long time fan of, and that is Deborah Blake. Deborah is the author of a multitude of books, which I'm not going to list all of them because there's so many that we will be here for half an hour just talking about all the books. So the most recent additions to her plethora of books is the Everyday Witches Coven and the Eclectic Witches Book of Shadows. Those are the two most recent ones. If you'd like to know more, there will be a link to her website with all of her books, including fiction and nonfiction. You guys can check them all out there. But like I said, we will be here forever going through all the titles. So anywho, I digress. Deborah, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. And you're not wrong. If we listed them all and then threw in the decks, because I have a tarot
Yes.
deck and an oracle deck, yeah, we'd be at the end of the half an hour and people be going, "What are we talking about?"
It's so true. And it's funny being a longtime fan of yours. I have about 5 or 6 of your books and 2 of your decks. But the rest of them, I'm just like, I didn't realize that A, you wrote fiction, and B, I was like, I knew she had more books out there, but wow, lady, you are
Yeah,
busy.
I think the Everyday Witches Coven was number 13 of the nonfiction, not counting the oracle deck and the tarot deck. And I have about the same number of novels out in various different series, some of which have witches and some of which do not have witches. But yeah, I look at that list sometimes and go, well, that explains why I'm so tired.
I will say it is very astonishing that, as a fellow author as well, it's like, you kind of made me look at your list and I'm like, damn, I'm slacking. I need to get on
Well,
myself.
you have to remember that I wrote the first one in 2005 and it came out in 2007. So
Mhm.
I've been plugging away at this for quite some time. And what I tend to do in general, I usually manage 2 books a year.
That's
Which
still really
is,
good though.
well, it is, but I mean, I have author friends, especially fiction author friends who somehow managed to put out 4, and I just look at them and I'm like, "Do you not sleep? What?"
And that's funny because I was talking to my husband the other day and I was like, I really need to finish my book series, my fiction book series that I've been working on for 7 years because I have ADHD and the hyper focus of it wore off.
Uh-huh.
And so I'm like, okay, well, now I need to get back in and actually finish it and all this other stuff. Now that the hyper focus is starting to creep back in, which is good. But, at the same time, I'm looking at other people where I'm like, how did you write 4, sometimes even 5? I think that I think Rick Riordan wrote like 5 books in 1 year.
Yeah.
And I'm just like,
Well,
how? How did you do it? Do
I
you
think
sleep?
some people's brains work for more than 2 hours a day. I don't
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean,
That is a
that could,
thing.
yeah. Well, and for the long until about a year ago, I also had a 3/4 time day job, which, I mean, that's the thing looking back at it, I'm like, how the heck did I do both? And in fact, I did end up making the decision to leave because with COVID complicating everything and making
Mhm.
the day job more difficult and just making, I think, thinking and getting through life more difficult, in a general kind of way. I know my focus and my creativity really went downhill in the last few years. And I said, okay, I'm going to have to pick one. I can't, and I am getting older. That might have something to do with it. Not, no, definitely not. Um, but yeah, I mean, if it makes you feel any better, I did finally have to say, okay, I'm gonna have to make a choice here and focus on one thing or the other because I was barely managing to get the writing done, and I was definitely not feeling creative or energized about it. And it's slowly starting to come back.
Mhm.
Yay. So
I
yeah.
think that, with COVID, writing got hard for a minute because we were just
Oh,
all
it did.
so
And
in our heads
yeah.
during COVID. So,
Well,
and
and
still are, but
depressed and stressed, and you know, I have a couple of author friends who actually were able to somehow hide out in their books and write well. Most of the authors that I know and most of the ones that I follow online, I saw, a lot of people saying, "Is there anybody else out there struggling?" And so it actually did make me feel better that it wasn't just me.
Mhm.
That and it wasn't just writers, it was creative people. Because my day job was running an artist cooperative shop with 50 artists, and people couldn't create anything. I mean, it was just, I think we all just sort of got stuck spinning around in circles, going, for a
Yeah,
while.
it was a little scary and a little heart gut-wrenching and heartbreaking and all of that because, it's so hard to create art when you're just not
Oh,
in
yeah.
it, you know? So, yeah, I totally feel that, and that's so cool that your day job was that because I'm also an artist,
Yeah, well, me and
ADHD.
yeah, well, and I've been making gemstone jewelry for 30 years. That was one of the ways I got into doing this. A friend and I, a friend who's a potter, we went, we need a place to sell our stuff. And everybody went, well, you should start one. And we said, you're crazy. And then we did it anyway. And it turns out we were crazy, but it was okay.
That's the best way to do it. Sometimes
Yep.
those crazy plans absolutely work out.
Well, it's like I didn't actually plan to be a nonfiction author. I'd always wanted to write, from the
Mhm.
time I was fairly young. I think I wrote my first novel, which was probably 10 pages long, in sixth grade in the back of math class, when I was supposed to be mathing, which might explain why my math skills are not so good. But I always wanted to write, but the first book that I wrote for Llewellyn, Circle, Coven and Grove, was kind of an accident. I had just started my coven, and thought, oh, I wish I had a book that had, a year's worth of, full moons and new moons and, holidays and some basic advice on how to do a coven and, that sort of thing. And I couldn't find one. So, this voice went, you should write it. And, if you've been a witch for 15 minutes, not to ignore that voice. Because it won't come back and tell you again. Uh, and so I did, but it was always sort of intended to be just a one-off. And it turned out, first of all, I loved working with Llewellyn, who was the
Mhm.
ones who originally put that book out. Um, and I also went, oh, look, I finished a book. I no longer have the excuse that I have never finished a book, which is what happened with my fiction. I'd get like a third of the way through or halfway through and then, wander off and go, oh, well, I never finished anything. And so then I started seriously working on the fiction, but I also said, I just had this other idea. I wonder if they'd like another book. And the rest is history.
And the first book that you were just mentioning, the Circle Coven Grove, that was the original kind of one that's actually, I guess you could say, the inspiration for your newest one, Everyday
It
Witches Coven.
actually it actually was, and in fact, it went out of print a while ago. I mean, people still use it, they still loved it, and the fun thing, which, is sort of a neat announcement, it's going to be reissued by, Crossed Crow Books, which,
I just started some work with them as well, so that's
is it? Yeah.
cool.
No,
They're
I was
great.
very excited because yeah, I have 2 books that have gone out of print with Llewellyn. There's that one, and there's Witchcraft on a Shoestring, which literally went out of print like 2 months ago or something.
Mhm.
And yeah, the Crossed Crow Books folks had asked me to write a foreword for a different author's book that they were reissuing, which when they contacted me, I went, I love that book. I have that book on my shelf. That, I have the original. You don't even have to send me a copy. I can look at the one I have on my shelf. And then I sort of thought about it and I went, huh. So you're reissuing books, are ya? And had a lovely conversation with them in which they said, wait, you'd like us to do yours? That would be great. And I said, yeah. But in the meanwhile, back to the Everyday Witches Coven, I had thought about doing sort of an updated version of Circle Covenant Grove because,
Mhm.
it was out of print and I did love it. And I realized that I actually needed to write a completely different book. Well, sort of completely different. I mean, it still has, you know, spells and rituals in it, but um, I wrote that book in 2005. I had only been leading my own group, Blue Moon Circle, for a year. I, had been practicing with somebody else's group for quite a time before that.
Mhm.
Um, but I realized at the time when I was thinking about redoing the old book that my practice had changed quite a bit in all those years. And my circles practice, my Coven's practice had changed quite a bit. Coven really changed. I mean, COVID really changed it.
Mhm.
Um, but also witchcraft itself and the general practice of witchcraft. It's sort of hard to say general practice because there's like 100,000 different ways to do it. But if you look at witchcraft in sort of a broad picture, that has changed too, because basically an evolving spiritual practice.
Yes.
You know, back in 2005, my original high priestess had been, taught Wiccan, and I, started doing, most of my coven stuff was fairly Wiccan in orientation. Um, which is neither a good thing nor a bad thing. It just was what it was.
Mhm.
The women I started the group with were more eclectic witches, and not Wiccans. And so we sort of had gradually become more eclectic, and some parts of my rituals are still, they show their Wiccan roots, with which colors candles I use, that sort of thing. But some of the things we were doing were a lot less formal than the way we started out. And I have a friend in California who has been practicing with one other person for more than 20 years. They started out in a coven together. The coven broke up and they kept their practice. And I thought, well, are they a coven of two? They really are. Which is hence the subtitle, which is Rituals and Magic for Two or More.
Mhm.
And my stepdaughter, who lives in a different part of California, has this sort of free floating bunch of people that she occasionally practices with. And it's much less formal. And they're much more likely to do, like go to the ocean and just do magical work kind of things. And I thought about the fact that when I wrote Circle, Coven, and Grove all those years ago, my parameters were narrower,
Right.
when and so I decided that instead of redoing that book, what I wanted to do was sort of, reintroduce the idea of what today's coven is, what, different ways you could practice with other people, some of the time, all of the time, if you felt like it, with two people, with 10 people. And so, yeah, I sat down and wrote this entirely new book, which, I'm really pleased with it. And then, of course, Elizabeth Alba, who did the illustrations for my tarot and oracle deck, did the cover. And so the cover is just stunning.
It is. It's so beautiful. It is
She was
so, so
actually on
beautiful.
maternity leave and came off maternity leave long enough to paint that picture. Isn't that wonderful?
Oh, that's so
Yeah.
sweet.
Yeah, well, we are working on another oracle deck. Yeah, we're a good team. We really enjoy working together. So,
I think that's awesome. And that the book is such a great rendition of how witchcraft has changed from the very Wiccan era of the, late 90s, early 2000s, and into a much more eclectic kind of practice. And, to add to that eclectic kind of coven, style that you write about in your books, is my coven is completely online. We're separated by the entire globe. We have
wow,
people in
that's
England.
amazing.
Yeah, we have people in England. We have people in the Southeast US. We have people in the
Oh, I
Northeast.
want to come.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Come on down. We have lots of public stuff as well, but we also have our private stuff for just our
Right.
group. But we do offer public stuff because, we're not like a hush hush closed group. We're
Right.
we're one of those groups that, yes, we would like to welcome you in, but we also want to make sure that you're going to jive with us first. That way we're not throwing
Exactly.
off the whole, thing, which you do talk about in your book as well.
Oh,
And
yeah.
But
that is one thing that I had a lot more advice to give after many years of
yeah.
having a coven. I could say, okay, these are some things to look out for. These are some things that you might want to, whether you're starting a new coven or whether you're thinking about joining a pre-existing coven or asking people to come into your coven, you need to make sure you have good communication because that
Yes.
is oh, I did not realize. I mean, I knew from being in my previous coven, which in fact blew up because of not good communication eventually, and being guests at other covens, and going, whoa, if I'd realized this is the way they did things, I might not have come, or, I was expecting something different. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's a really important thing. And in fact, Blue Moon Circle went through a period of time where we allowed, a series of new people to come in. And one of the things that we learned through our own experience was that we actually, for because we're so close knit, we've been practicing together for so long
Mhm.
that we were going to be very selective on who we let. I mean, we have occasional times where somebody can bring a guest.
Right.
That's like summer solstice, which tends to be outside and be more celebratory than formal.
Mhm.
Yeah, we if we have friends who say, "Oh, I'm interested, could I come?" That's when we have them. But yeah, we added a new person last year or 2 years ago, and that was the first new person that I think we'd brought in 4 or 5 years. Now, I had a housemate during COVID for a year and a half, who was a friend of mine who, basically moved in to hide out. And thankfully, she was a witch. And so she lived here. She came to everything. And she still occasionally floats back.
Mhm.
But it is one of those things where, if you are going to be working with other people, whether it's 2 people or 10 people, you want to make sure you're all on the same page. One of the things that we found out was that I was more interested in having a larger coven than the other folks who were, the starting members. And they didn't really know how to say, oh, could we keep this small?
Right.
And and so they weren't happy when we had a bunch more people, and luckily for them, I went, "Wow, this is a lot more work, and I'm not sure I'm happy with this." At that point, they went, "Oh, well, since you brought it up," and I'm like, "Really? How many years have you been sitting here going, gee, we wish that, we were, 6 people instead of 11 people? Maybe somebody should have mentioned that." But, that's one of the things you learn as you work together, or your coven implodes and goes away, which unfortunately does happen a lot.
Yeah, it does.
And
And I have been part of covens in the past that they also imploded and eventually went away, and some
well,
just
and
kind of
sometimes
fizzled out, which isn't a bad thing.
yeah,
No.
right. Sometimes people wander off, they get busy, they get married, they get married to somebody who's not comfortable with witches, or the person who's leading it gets tired of leading and there's
Mhm.
nobody else to step up. So there's that. I mean, that's one of the other differences. This book, as opposed to Circle, Coven, and Grove, Circle, Coven, and Grove, I mostly, had things laid out as, okay, here's the ritual run by a high priest and a high priestess. And I did say things like, well, if you don't have a high priest, you can just have somebody else do it. With this one, I made it much more general.
Mhm.
I would say, facilitator or leader, and much more likely to use the they instead of he or she, so
Right.
that everybody felt included. Um, because that is one of the things about witchcraft is, for the most part, and there's always exceptions, but for the most part, we are very welcoming and open-minded community.
Yes.
And this is a place where people go who do not feel comfortable or accepted in other religious or spiritual paths. And I wanted to make sure that I was writing this book in such a way that nobody felt like they weren't being included, which I just didn't even think about that in 2005.
Mhm.
It was not on my radar quite as much. Um, you know, it's this is the whole thing about learning and practicing is hopefully, you figure some stuff out.
Absolutely. And, I think when it comes to any sort of group that you're planning on joining, obviously check it out for a good chunk of time. Don't just, go to 1 or 2 sessions and be like, I want to join. You may still have that notion, and that's okay to have that notion for 2 or 3 months, but give it some time to really understand because the thing too is when people are trying to get to know each other, you don't always see, I guess you could say,
Right.
the skeletons in the closet
Well, it's
until
it's like when you
later
start
on.
dating someone,
Yes.
everybody's on their best behavior and you're putting your best foot forward and everybody says, "Oh, we all get along so well." And then you start to relax and all of a sudden you realize that this person doesn't always bathe a lot before they come to ritual. And maybe this person comes stoned and that's not a thing you like. I mean, it
Right.
may fine with some groups, it may not be fine with your group. So yeah, it is one of those things, or you realize they're always late. And if that's a thing that's going to make you crazy, then you need to either talk to them about it or or say, we like to start on time. We know that pagan standard time is a thing for most covens, but it's not for ours. I mean, my group is fairly relaxed about that because yeah, people are crazy busy and we did have one person who consistently showed up like an hour late. So I just told her the ritual started at 6 when it didn't start till 7.
I
And
mean, that's one way to definitely do it. Be like, "Hey, we changed the time on this," but, that's an easy kind of fix.
well, and the ironic thing is that all these years later, she still comes to rituals, and over the years, she's gotten less and less late, and now she shows up like a half an hour early, and I'm like, "Ah, dude, I'm not set up yet. Okay, here, carry this out to the circle. You can help." So you just never know. Everything changes. But yeah, good communication is something I talk about quite a bit in the book,
Yes, definitely.
especially if you were going to start something from scratch, which is what I did. Yeah, there are a few questions which I lay out. Things, how often do you want to meet? How many people do you want to have? Is it okay for people to just come without, being vetted by everybody? Discuss all that stuff initially so that you don't end up 5 years later having people go, "Well, we wish we'd mentioned this."
And it's funny that you mention all of that because when our group when we originally started, which was, oh gosh, like a year and a half ago, um, and we started just kind of as a let's hang out and pull tarot together and just talk about
Right.
witchy stuff and just hang out kind of thing, like with witchy friends. That's all we really wanted to do. And then it slowly evolved in, "Okay, can we do some spell work? Sure. What do you guys want to do? Like, what are we looking for?" And then I would write ritual and lead it and do all this other stuff. And eventually everyone's like, we kind of act like a coven. Maybe we should just become one." And I'm like, oh, geez, I got to figure this out. And so your book came out the week before that conversation happened.
Are you serious?
I am
That's
serious. It
great.
showed up in my box from Llewellyn the week before that conversation happened. I was like,
You're
well, this
welcome.
is just really, really timing.
Yeah, I love it when the gods are subtle.
Well, and it's funny because we work with Loki and we also work with Morgan. So they're not subtle days.
No, neither subtle. No, not subtle
They
deities at
burst through the
all.
doors like Aragorn in
Yep.
the second movie, the Two Towers. So yeah, it's that whole scene of bursting through the doors like, I'm here. And I'm like,
Yeah. Well,
okay.
and I think my gods have learned not to be subtle with me because I'm a little slow on the uptake sometimes, and they got
Same.
tired of having to tell me 5 times, "By the way, we'd like you to do this. By the way, we'd like." So now it's just like, "Hey, yo,"
It's
which
funny
is
how
which
that
is good.
happens.
I'm actually okay with that.
It's really funny how that happens. My deities do that too. That they'll sometimes drop like a subtle hint to be like, "Hey, maybe you should think about this." And then
Yep.
like stuff will start popping up interestingly on social media. And then
Oh, yeah.
after that, it's like, "Okay, well that's kind of cool. That's a neat idea."
Mhm.
And then it's like, "No, no, no, we wanted you to do that." And it's like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah, I'm still a little slow on the uptake sometime. I had been thinking about the fact, I mean, I've been reading tarot for like 25 years professionally. That's one of the ways I ended up with my own tarot deck. They said, "Hey, would you like to do a tarot deck? Do you know anything about the Rider Waite?" Yeah, and I'm like, "Well, kinda." I was like, "Kinda, I don't." But I mostly hadn't been working with many new people because, again, having the day job and balancing it with the writing, there just wasn't time or energy. And I had, regular clients who I'd seen for years, and every once in a while somebody would find their way to me. And, now that it's been a year since I left the day job, I started thinking, you know, I wonder if I should do something about trying to, put this out into the universe a little bit more. And literally within 3 weeks, I had three people contact me, one local and two online, to say, "Can you do this by Zoom?" And I went, one, two, three. Okay, then. And I actually did. I went on social media and I went, just so people know, I can do tarot readings by Zoom. And people were like, "Wait, what? You do what? What?"
Mhm.
So, but yeah, it was one of those things that when the third person showed up in a really short period of time, I thought, okay, so this is the God saying, "Yes, this stray idea of yours is the way to go. Now go do it."
I love when that works out. And that's also kind of how this podcast was born. This podcast came out of, "Hey, I kind of want to do this thing. Maybe I should just like
Mhm.
write a book or something,
Right.
that kind of thing." And they're just like, "Or you could do a podcast." I'm like, "But doing a podcast, I was doing a podcast with another person at the time."
Uh,
And I'm like, "Do I really want to do it by myself though? Like, do I want to listen to myself talk?" And then, as soon as I started doing it, it was just like, "Okay, well, if five people listen to it, I'll be happy."
right.
And then it was like first week 50, second week
Wow.
100, and I'm like,
That's
"Oh,
great.
well, apparently I'm doing a podcast now."
Which is funny because that's another thing that I have been considering doing is some sort of podcast, because I do like to talk to people about witchcraft, and
Mhm.
yeah, sometimes I like to talk to them about like the cool books or whatever, the cool people. And I'm like, well, do I want to take on one more thing? I don't know. I mean, my thing is I don't want to mess with the technical background stuff because it makes my brain hurt. Yeah, so yeah, I don't know. We'll see what the
We'll see what
gods
the
drop
gods
in my lap.
insist.
Yeah, maybe they'll let me, finish the book I'm working on first and then do it. I don't know. We'll see.
We'll see what happens with that. So, in that regard, you just mentioned that you're working on another book. Is it fiction, nonfiction, somewhere in between?
Okay, I actually have two more contracts with Llewellyn for nonfiction. And I have promised my very, very patient agent that I would start working on a novel that I've been talking about for a while and had to finish the last batch of Llewellyn books. So I handed in relatively recently the Llewellyn Little Book of Witchcraft, which will be coming out in September. That's going to be
I
fun.
did just
You
see
know,
that. Yes.
Yes, well, they have this really fun series of Llewellyn Little Books of, and I just love a cute little hardcover. I mean, I
They're
was
adorable. I have so
I
many of them.
I basically said, can I write one of those?" And my editor said, "We haven't had anybody write the Little Book of Witchcraft." And I went, "Well, tag, I'm it." Um, and so I handed that in, and you mentioned the Eclectic Witches Book of Shadows, which I love this book so much, and thankfully most people seem to. It was my first
It's
hardcover.
gorgeous.
It is gorgeous. Mickey Mueller did an amazing job with both the cover and the interior illustrations. It's full color. It's so beautiful. And basically I set out to do, what a sort of a book of shadows, you didn't have to start it yourself,
Mhm.
you could have like some of the information you needed and then add the things you learned as you went along. We put, you know, beautiful pages that you could write, your own things. And what happened is I kept getting messages from my readers saying, I love this book and it's so beautiful. I don't want to write in it.
That's my
But,
issue. I have 2. I have one that to keep pretty and one to write in. I
well,
I
then
got one
you're,
from Llewellyn,
yep,
to review, and then my next one I bought myself because I'm like, "I want to write in this,
yep.
but it's so darn pretty that if I mess up, I'm gonna cry." Like,
And
yeah.
and that is why I did the Eclectic Witches Book of Shadows companion, which
Oh.
is going to be a paperback that it's going to have additional information, but it's also going to have like some things to, prompts of things to do and lots of space to write things, so that the people who couldn't bring themselves to write in the hardcover will have an option. I begged Llewellyn to let me do this. I'm like, you don't understand, people won't write in the book. And they went, but there's on it. I said, I don't care. And I don't blame them, because I grew up with a mother who was a librarian. I can't write in the book either. I can't even dog ear the pages. So
Yeah, we
I
don't do that in this
absolutely,
household.
yeah, no, I absolutely get it. So those are done and they're in with Llewellyn. The next one's up. I'm going to be doing another little book of, this one is going to be spellcraft. And that's
Ooh.
what I'm working on next for them. And then after that, I don't know if among the books of mine that you have is my 365-day book, my A Year and a Day of Everyday
I
Witchcraft.
have that one, yes.
Well, that's another thing that, I've had, it came out in, oh, I don't know, 2018 or 2019. And I had people who said, I've been using this every year, but, I've now done the same thing on the spring equinox for, 4 years. Could you write another one? And so that's what I'm going to do, later this year, is work on, and it'll be something slightly different. I'm going to take a different approach to it, just because you don't want to write the same basic book all the time. And in the meanwhile, yes, hopefully I will be working on a novel, which is going to be magical realism, which is something I have never written before, and we'll see how it goes. But it's actually going to be about somebody who reads tarot cards. So there you go. I ought to know that part. Although she's not a witch. It's not a witchcraft book. It's a magical realism, which is sort of elements of magic in everyday life kind of things. Um, so yeah, I have stuff. I have stuff to do, things I'm supposed to be working on.
Well, they all sound absolutely amazing, and the Year and a Day Everyday Witchcraft, book is fantastic as well. I mean, honestly, everybody who's listening, just any of Deborah's books are fantastic. All of the tarot cards and oracle decks and everything else are fantastic. Just buy 1 or 50, whichever you prefer. But they're all
I say
wonderful.
50, do 50. I mean, if I get to vote on this, I just finished a really expensive project at my house. And so, yes, buy all the books.
Su Support your authors, and if you are
Yes.
somebody who is financially strapped and you cannot support your authors, go to your local library, request a
Oh,
copy. They will
absolutely.
get a copy. If they don't
They
have one,
would.
they will
Yep.
request it either from another library or they will buy a copy for
Yep,
their
and
own personal
sometimes
stores.
sometimes if you go request one from your library will buy the book, which is not a bad thing. Authors love libraries. Do not ever feel bad about getting one of my books from the library, unless you're going to write it, in which case, just buy your own. But uh, but no, I love libraries. Libraries are my happy place. In fact, the first thing that I do whenever I get a copy of a new book is I march down to my local library and I donate them a copy, and I say, here, put this on your shelf so people can read it. Yeah, I am all for libraries. The other thing is, if you can't afford to buy all the books, figure out which one is going to be the most useful for you and start with that, and then see how you feel about it. Um,
Yes.
I mean, I try when I write, my style, if you want to call it that, is very conversational. It's very relaxed. It's very accessible. And what I tell people is it's like sitting down across the table with a cup of tea with your, friendly neighborhood high priestess and just talking about the things you wanted to know, and saying, "Hey, how can we do this?" Or, do you have a good spell for that? And so that's what my books are like. They're basically, you know, I don't ever send you off looking for expensive esoteric herbs that, you've never heard of. I'm going to say, look, buy some dill and then you can use it in your kitchen too.
Mhm. And I think probably one of my favorite books the first book I ever read of yours that is still to this day one of my favorites is Everyday Witchcraft, which was published, I believe, in 2014, 2015, somewhere in that range. But just perfect for, somebody who is trying to figure out how to incorporate witchcraft in your everyday life. And, because sometimes being a witch is hard because you've got the job and you got the kids and you got the dog or the cats or the birds or, chickens,
Well, and
whatever you have.
you may have a significant other who is not into witchcraft, so you have to grab 5 minutes, when they're at the grocery store,
Hmm.
or you may not be out of the broom closet, which not everybody is.
Hmm.
And if you share your house with other people and you can't leave your stuff around, well, gee, there's still ways to get around that. So yeah, I have two books, which the my perennial probably bestseller is my third book, which is The Goddesses in the Details, which was the
Hmm.
first book that I wrote about how to integrate your spiritual beliefs as a witch with your everyday life. And people loved that so much that eventually I did Everyday Witchcraft as sort of a follow up. I mean, you can definitely read them completely separately, but
Yes,
it's that same idea of, you know, how how do you integrate your witchcraft with your busy life without making yourself crazy? And I wrote that one because honestly, I needed it. I needed it for me because I found that I was writing books on witchcraft for other people to do witchcraft. And other than when I got together with my group, I wasn't finding the time in my own life to do it. And so I spent some time thinking about, well, what are some fast and easy ways, ways you can do that in 5 minutes. If all you have is 5 minutes, then it's like exercise. You grab 5 minutes here and 5 minutes there, and it actually adds up to something that's really good for you. And
exactly.
witchcraft is
Yes.
the same thing. You don't have to do a full ritual every week or even every full moon. Sometimes I celebrate the full moon by going outside, looking at the moon and waving hi at the lady and just, standing there for 5 minutes soaking up the magic and then go back inside. And that's
Sometimes I do
okay.
that in my own bathroom looking out the window being like, "Hi, moon. Thanks
Oh
for all
yeah.
your blessings. Good night. I'm going to bed."
Exactly. I mean, sometimes that's all it takes. I think you have to find what works for you. And for some people, big elaborate rituals work for them. And yay. And I like that on occasion. I mean, I get a lot out of it. It's just that on your average day, I don't even have the energy to light a candle. So, it's just, sometimes, yes, going to the window and waving at the moon. If that's what you do, that's what you do.
And yeah, that is very true. If I didn't have my weekly group, I there are weeks that I would go without even practicing because
Yep.
there are sometimes, yes, I do a weekly podcast talking about witchcraft and I read all these books. Outside of the books reading and the podcast, there's sometimes not a whole lot of time in my day for me to do the whole witchcraft thing
Right.
because I have kids, I have dogs, I have a garden, I have a husband, I have all these things that I've got going on in my life.
Oh, yeah.
And by the time you get done with all of it, you're just like, I am too tired to even look at my phone, let
Oh,
alone light a
exactly.
candle.
I'm like, "Oh, crap, I still haven't cleaned all 4 litter boxes, and it's, like, 3 minutes before I fall over. I guess I
Right?
instead of doing ritual, I'm gonna clean the litter boxes." But, one of the things that I have come to realize for myself, and this is, very possibly true for whoever's listening, is that for me, witchcraft is less about an active practice of casting spells and doing rituals.
Mhm.
I mean, there's that too, but it's more how I walk my talk through my life. I try and be kind to nature because that is part of my spiritual belief is that nature is sacred. I try and be kind to other human beings because even though I don't love them all equally, um, I believe in channeling deity as you walk through the world. And the best way to do that is to spread love. And that doesn't mean you have to love everybody. It just means you have to not be a hateful, nasty person. Um,
Exactly, yes.
so for me, and things like, yeah, yes, I have a very large garden and I compost and I recycle and I do things that are for me a manifestation of my belief as a witch that nature is sacred. So, and I say thank you to the gods.
Mhm.
And sometimes I ask for help and I don't always ask for help in a formal I'm going to cast a spell kind of way. Sometimes I just say, "Oh, please let my plane get there and be okay."
Please let my luggage be with my plane when it
Right,
lands.
exactly, exactly. Please let the snowstorm turn out not to be as bad as they're saying it's going to be so I can go home. And yeah, I mean, I was traveling. I had no ritual stuff with me, so I just said please. And guess what? The
It
snowstorm was not
works.
so
It still
bad, and
works.
yep, and I'm betting there were a whole lot of people going, "Oh, pretty please," to whichever deity of their choice, you know, and I believe all those prayers end up where they're supposed to be. So one of the things that I try and get across to people in my books, and when I talk to them in real life, which I occasionally do, is don't be too hard on yourself. Don't put yourself under so much pressure that you feel like you can't be a witch if you can't do spells and rituals all the time. That's not what it's about. It's what's in your heart, it's what's in your spirit. It's, you know, pretty much what you're putting out into the world. That's what being a witch is. And yes, if you can do a cool spell every once in a while, well, I have books for that. Yeah, that's
You
great.
you do, you
Um,
have several books for that, which are
and
great.
but on the other hand, you know, yeah, you don't have to do that. You can just live your best life, follow your spiritual path in the best way that you can. And you're just as much of a witch as anybody else, and I don't care who tells you differently.
I wholeheartedly agree with everything that you said, and the only thing I have to add to it also is you don't it have to be an expensive witch. You can be a
Oh,
cheap
yeah.
witch because guess what? None of the candles, none of the tools, none of the herbs, none of that, those are all extra. You don't need
I
them to
I
do the
call those
magic.
optional extras in my
Yes.
books. Optional extras. They're great. They may help you with your focus. I actually wrote a book called Witchcraft on a Shoestring
Mhm.
and gave all sorts of alternative ways for people to practice without spending a lot of money. Including yes, go to the library and get your books there. Or share them with if you have a coven, have one person buy one book, have another person buy another book, and y'all just share. So yeah, I absolutely agree with that. You know, I happen to be a crystal junkie. It's a thing. I mean, I am a Taurus, so I come by the rock junkie, honestly. I have huge crystals. I have little crystals. I have a whole cabinet full of crystals that I don't want the cats to get at. Um, but that's me. That's my thing because the stones just make me happy. I also, really love to go to the ocean. Sadly, I don't live anywhere near the ocean. So, I get very jealous of the witches who get to just go stand at the ocean and like talk to Yamiya or whatever. Um, but yeah, I have a ton of candles and sometimes I use them and sometimes I don't use them. I mean, part of the reason I have a ton is because the group uses them.
Mhm.
But I also buy my herbs in bulk from the local health food store where they're way cheaper and way fresher than if you get them at the grocery store or most other places. And I'll take them home and I'll say, okay, this bunch is going to be for my magical work, and I'll set it aside in with my magical tools. And then I'll say, and the rest of this is going to be for, cooking or healing or, whatever. And
Exactly.
yeah, it still all came out of the same baggie. Yeah, spend whatever you're comfortable spending and get I mean, the toys are fun, the tools are fun. I have an athame that basically sits on my altar now because I used it for years in the
Mhm.
beginning, and now I don't, but I like it and it's pretty. But you don't have to have an athame. You can point with your finger. That's already
Exactly.
pre-attached. You know.
I bought my athame at a flea market for $5. And the only reason I bought it is because it was in the style of an Egyptian dagger, which I don't know
Oh,
the actual
cool.
name of it. It's one of the really pretty cool looking ones. But anywho, I digress. And it had Isis on it, and Isis was who I was working with at the time. So
Right,
that was the whole reason I bought it. It was like, hey, I don't work with ISIS anymore. It doesn't apply really to fit my practice
right.
anymore. So it doesn't fit, but it is still pretty and I still appreciate it and I still love it. I still also don't use an athame because I'm like, I don't have the mental capacity to do the whole thing. So I'm just like, do it with my finger really quick and
Right.
I'm just done.
Exactly.
Quick and
Well,
done.
we have this beautiful goblet. One of the women in my group spent many years as a potter, and she actually made this beautiful goblet. We all decorated it. She glazed it. We used it for years. It is up on my altar. But COVID, last time we got together, we literally had Dixie cups and a pretty pitcher that we poured the ale for cakes and ale out of
Hmm.
because we weren't going to pass a glass around the circle. Are you crazy?
Yeah.
So yeah, for whatever reason, your practice is going to grow and change, and your tools are going to grow and change. And one of the things that I've found from my own experience, and again, this is, your mileage may vary. When I was a newbie witch, I really needed the tools to help me focus, to remind me of my intent and what I was doing. And as I got more and more practice, I didn't need them most of the time. Sometimes when we do our formal rituals, we like to pull out all the pageantry. I
Hmm.
mean, it's nice to do that and light all the candles. You know, Sometimes we have all had a really rough day and we're tired, and we say, we're not going to do formal quarter calls. We're just going to, chat about what we want to accomplish. We're going to do our spell or our ritual or whatever it is to the best of our ability, and then we're going to have the feast.
Hmm.
And that would be grand. So, yeah, it definitely does not need to be expensive, except books. Books are good.
Yeah, books are good. Always, if you can, get the books. If you can't,
Yeah.
that's okay. And yeah, if you're in a group that can share the books, great. If you're in a long distance group like my group, setting up a kind of maybe like a fund for people who can't afford them and seeing who can contribute to helping that out, those
Right.
types of people. There are different ways to go about it. And of course, at the end of the road is always the libraries. But
Yep.
yeah, so
Just do not pirate books,
no,
because that
no, that's bad.
that's stealing money from authors, publishers, everybody who's involved. And what happens, and I've had this happen to friends whose books were pirated so much they quit writing. They
Hmm.
just couldn't make a living at it. And every day I get, somebody saying, "Oh, I saw your deck on, this site for $4." And gee, when I bought it, it didn't come with the book. And there was this code on the back you were supposed to be able to scan with your phone. And I went, well, first of all, you probably just got a virus. So sorry. Second of all, if you find a $32 deck online for $4, I can pretty much guarantee you it's pirated from China, probably, or some other
Mhm.
place. Um, and yeah, it's not going to be good. Which doesn't mean you can't find legit used copies occasionally, but for the most part, yeah, just be cool, people. Just be cool.
Just be cool indeed. Now, I know that you just got back from a convention and all of that. But do you have any other classes or appearances or events or anything that you would like to promote or talk about?
I actually, right this very minute, I don't have anything planned. I may do some sort of an online class. I have a Patreon, and depending on which level you follow me at, I mean, there's a lot of people at the $1 level or the $3 level, and they get a lot of cat pictures and me talking about, yeah, snow and things. And at a certain level, I had been doing a monthly ritual, and you know, things got crazy, and I sort of wandered away from that, and bless those people. Nobody complained, nobody ran away. They're just like, "Yeah, we were going to give you that money anyway." And I'm like, "Oh, well, thank you very much. The cats really appreciate it. Now they get to eat." Um, but I may go back to trying to do some form of online, ritual, or even just a chat about witchcraft or something. I probably will do it through my Patreon, but I might try and experiment and just do a Zoom something and see what happens. I don't know, but yeah, there's no official plans for anything right now. I did just put up on my website, which you will tell everybody how to get
Mm-hmm.
to. I put up a place where people could go and request a Zoom tarot reading, which I've started back to doing now that I have a little bit more time. But they can find everything I do on my website. There's links. I have an Etsy shop where I sell signed books and some of the jewelry I make, and little witchcraft kits, whatever, basically whatever I feel like doing at the time. But there's always signed books because people ask me for that. So I just
Mm-hmm.
finally set it up. And yeah, the Patreon, and yeah, they can check out the books and see what's going on and figure out where to follow me. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. I have not yet gone on to TikTok because I think if I have to add another social media, my head will explode.
And TikTok is hard, to be fair.
Yeah, and it's hard, and I think it's designed for younger than me people for the
No.
most
I follow actually several accounts of elderly folks that have their own TikToks, very popular TikToks to be fair.
wow.
Yeah, they will go on there and they will make jokes or they will teach you stuff or they will talk to you about stuff. Like
Yep.
it's really cool. Like I enjoy it. I am one of those people that I'm really bad about making the TikToks, but I will watch all the TikToks.
Well, and I think that's where I'm gonna start, at some point when I have 5 minutes to rub together, is I'm gonna join and watch
You will
quietly
lose
from the background
hours.
for a while.
So
Yeah, see, and that's one of the things I worry about, because as it is, you
but
know
there's a cool thing with TikTok nowadays. You TikTok actually has a thing that's it will tell you after 30 minutes. It's like, "Hey, you've been watching for a while. You need to
get
take a
off,
break." And it will pop
go
up
eat a
across your
cookie.
screen. Yeah. Or you can snooze it for 10 minutes and
Right.
but after 10 minutes it'll still pop up. So but yes, it does
Yeah.
have content warnings of you basically saying, "Hey, you've been watching for a minute. You should probably go
Right.
take a break."
Which is a good thing. I
Yeah.
need that on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook too. I mean, I don't tend to spend a half an hour on each one individually, but I'll like go check one, then I'll go check the other. And no matter how much I check, I still miss stuff because
Mhm.
there's too much going on.
Too
It's
many
the
algorithms
thing.
and all of that good stuff.
Oh, see, the algorithms that's a bad word. That's such a oh my God. And those algorithms are not kind to authors.
No, they're not. They never have been, and they never will be, I don't think,
No, I
because
mean,
we're not
I could
fancy enough for that kind of
no,
thing.
I can put up a cute cat picture and get like 2,000 likes. Put up a cover of my book and go, "Oh, look, I have a new book out," and 6 people see it. It's a
Right?
very weird. I don't, because they want you to pay them to have
I
everybody
know, and
forget.
it's terrible. I know
And
everything's a business model, but still, it's
it's
just
yeah, no,
icky.
it's just, I'm bringing people to your site. Take that and be happy. So,
Exactly, exactly. Well,
yeah.
Deborah, this has been absolutely amazing and wonderful. I have enjoyed chatting with you so much. You are welcome to come back anytime you'd like. We can
Oh,
chat
well,
about
thank you.
whatever you want to chat about because I would love to just sit here and talk for hours again with you, no matter what.
Well, hey, come September, well, it's Little Book of Witchcraft. Just saying.
We will set a date. It'll be a good time. But
It will
everybody
be.
who's listening, make sure you guys are taking care of yourself, be good to each other, and I will see you all next time. Bye bye, everyone.